Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to this episode of our show. This is your host, Keith Doherty. Today our special guest is top real estate broker Debra Dobbs of App Properties based out of Chicago, Illinois. Debra began her real estate career 32 years ago, selling renovated loft condos in Chicago's West Loop. A Chicago Association of Realtors top 1% producer for the past 15 years, she is a top 50 agent in Chicago, number one individual agent with App Properties, and on the roster of Who's Who in Chicago real estate. She holds multiple professional designations, the prestigious Certified Residential Specialist, $1 Million Guild member of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing, and graduate of the Realtor Institute, as well as an urban real estate degree from University of Illinois. She was recently in the press for putting together a complicated deal for 12,000 square foot of residential condominiums at Water Tower on behalf of a developer client. The property had been on and off the market for many years, and she represented the buyers in this transaction. All right, with all that said, Debra, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Keith. I'm delighted.
And Debra, if we could start for our listeners, what led you into real estate? Was it something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did you maybe stumble into it?
Definitely stumbled into real estate. Wasn't anywhere on my radar in terms of what I wanted to do when I grew up, and actually spent a lot of time traveling around the States and Europe, and opened a gelateria, produced a play, and just sort of fell into an opportunity back in 1984 and realized I loved it.
Yeah, it seems like that there's not too many people that, even if you asked a child, right, you ask a kid, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most, kids will say, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a police officer, or a fireman. It's rare that someone says, I want to be a real estate agent when I grow up. Definitely seems like it's one of those industries that it's not, even though it's so rewarding, financially as well as personally, it's not regarded as like a standard profession, it seems like.
I think that's very true, and I think that there's also an interesting skill set that one, to be successful in real estate, that one needs to have. And I think and I don't mean to diminish this because I have ADD, but I think that actually is one of the traits that sort of helps me in this profession. And the other is I think you have to have a little bit of a zealot-like quality where you can sometimes morph into a version of yourself as opposed to approaching things from a very black and white perspective. There's a lot of gray in the real estate world.
Absolutely. And Debra, do you think you could talk a little bit about what personal attributes, traits, and qualities you think have most contributed to the success that you've had in real estate?
Patience, for certain, and that can be patience in waiting for a deal to come together. It can be patience with a first-time home buyer that needs to see 50 or 60 properties before they can make a decision. And one of my dearest friends now, who started as a client, hit the record with seeing 79 properties before she bought. My clients would describe me as a mama bear, and they would say that, I fiercely advocate for their best interest, and they know that, and I get that sense, and I think that's the trait that I think that I do have. I also think it's important to know when to see the trees for the forest and vice versa. Sometimes people get caught up in the tiny details and they lose sight of the big picture. I guess maybe another metaphor or ism would be sometimes you have to lose a couple of battles before you can win the war. I think integrity is perhaps the most important. When people realize how much of a real estate transaction happens if you're the client, without the client actually being in the room. You think about all the conversations that happen with the other agent, with the attorney, with the inspector, starting with negotiation. Your client has to know that when you are in the room, you are really advocating for their best interest, and that takes a lot of trust.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you had a friend, a client that took 79 properties. I think we actually had a guest on the show. I don't know how many properties she showed, but to talk about patience, she had a client that took 10 years to put them into a house. So to me, that's like extreme patience for sure. I mean, 79 houses too would still take a lot of time to go through to be able to finally put somebody in something.
Well, that was 1 year. I can't even imagine going over 10 years. I do have a client that's been my client since 1988, but that's been a long time, but a lot of deals over the course of that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Debra, you kind of mentioned some different traits and qualities and some things. Could you maybe give our listeners an example of when these traits have played a role in your path toward success?
Yes, I can, and I can think of two or three that really stand out, actually. One, and it's a deal that it might sound kind of odd to say, but I'm proud of not so much the outcome. I was thrilled that the outcome went in our favor, and my client is very happy, or was very happy at the closing. But for me, it was an incredible learning experience, and when you've been a real estate agent for 32 years, you would think, okay, well, what else could I possibly learn? But my client at the time is one of the top, is a top businessman in Chicago, runs his firm. He's very tough to deal with, but very fair. And is my buyer. The seller, also a top businessman, also a tough negotiator, and we started a negotiation process in October. We wrote an offer, submitted it, and we finished negotiating and came to an agreement on terms in January and closed in February. And there were so many times during that deal where one side or the other was going to walk away. It looked like nothing was going to be able to, no one was going to be happy, and the deal would fall apart, and then I would resurrect it. And to have both the buyer and the seller say to me that they were extremely impressed with my negotiating skills and credit me with keeping them both at the deal table to get to a closing felt really good about that.
Yeah, that definitely, obviously, exercising a lot of patience there too to keep, and try to satisfy both sides. Was there another agent involved too to add
there was
personality?
There was another agent involved, and that unfortunately was. I work with some fantastic people, agents that I have such great admiration for, and am thrilled to have as professional associates and my peers. And unfortunately, in this transaction, that was not the case. Which made the deal even more tough to pull together and keep together. But I think I have a philosophy when I'm working with clients, and particularly in the negotiation phase, but really throughout the transaction, which is everyone has to walk away feeling good about the transaction, or if possible, feeling good about the outcome. So, and if there's something that doesn't really cost, if I have a buyer and they are able to give something in a negotiation that at the end of the day really isn't going to cost them anything, and by that I don't mean money, it just means maybe it's something that they can easily adjust and it doesn't have an impact on them, good or bad. Those are the things I suggest that people consider sort of giving up, because everyone in a negotiation there's this idea that I'm giving something up to the other side. And as opposed to, what can I do to get the other side something that they might want so that I can also maybe get something that's important to me? That's a good approach to have a positive outcome in a negotiated transaction, I think.
Excellent. And Debra, I think whenever somebody builds a successful career in a business, that sometimes getting there, the road is filled with a lot of bumps along the way. Can you talk a little bit about some of the adversities and trials you've had to overcome in order to achieve your goals?
I really can't, and I've thought about this. And it's not that I have this storied life of any, I mean, I grew up with great brothers and parents, and, we certainly had a wonderful life, but we did not have a lot of money, and we had a lot of struggles. My parents had a lot of struggles financially, but I just have a great memory of my childhood, and I think that has stood me well, because I can't say that I had any adversities that stood in my way or in my path to achieving goals or to being successful. And I think actually some of the major adversities were just what I experienced as a child and what I saw my parents go through, and it gave me in so many ways such an appreciation. But also, when we work in an industry, at least in Chicago, where we have a lot of expensive houses, people have gorgeous houses with beautiful finishes, and I remember my father once saying that, what someone has on the outside, whether it's their house, their car, their clothing, it doesn't define who they are. So you can try to find a way to be happy for people that have more than you do and have empathy and compassion for someone who's struggling, but realize that those are all superficial, sort of outward appearances, and that doesn't define a person. And I think that sort of growing up with that and turning what could have been perceived as an adversity or a type of envy and being able to turn that around, I think that's a good quality and certainly helps me in my business. And then I guess I'd have to speak to the downturn in the real estate market. A lot of agents that I thought were really good agents and would hope that they had been able to make it or stick the market out weren't able to. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to overcome some really bad years in the real estate world where we weren't making any money. A lot of us weren't making any money.
And I guess, as these obstacles come up for you, I know you said, you didn't really foresee a lot of them, but you did have the downturn in the market was pretty significant, but as things like that came up, what kept you going? What was your driving force? Why didn't you give up?
For someone who is incredibly type A and often described as rather a control freak or very controlling, I have a very zen outlook on life, so I think that things are meant to be the way they're just meant to be. And everything comes at the right moment. Be patient. So that's another, my daughter thinks I use these isms way too much, but there are some that I really live by. And one of them is that everything comes at the right moment. Be patient. So I just knew that this was something that had to happen or was happening for a reason. And I just had to keep my head down and do my job and know that we were going to turn a corner at some point and not get bogged down on every deal and when is the next deal going to come. It will come when it's supposed to, and it worked. And actually, when I think back in 2009, which by all intents and purposes would be considered a pretty dismal year, I want to say that might have been the first or second best year of my career.
And Debra, looking forward, you've obviously had a very long career, 32 years. What's your vision looking forward, say, over the next 5 years?
So every August, September, I start planning for the following year. And I have a very specific way that I approach my business development and what goals I'm setting for the following year. And I have a terrific, just an amazing managing broker here. And he spends a lot of time with me over those 2 months. And we just started that process. And one of the things that I'm considering adding, or one of the business development ideas that we're talking about is, as I call it, dipping my toe into the team waters. I'm a single or solo agent, an individual agent, whatever the phrase would be. I do have an executive assistant or admin assistant. I actually have two, and they're fantastic. But I have a couple of agents that have from time to time helped me, or I send some business their way. And there's a synergy. We've discovered the synergy between the 5 of us that is really special, and we find that we all sit together in the office even though 3 of those people don't have designated areas. And I've sat down with each of the 4 people and my managing broker, and I'm just exploring maybe we'd become a team. And I can see how, from a business development perspective, certainly I could do substantially more volume and more transactions if I have more help. But I also see a number of teams that are really structured to do more business, not necessarily working as a finely tuned team or machine, but it's all about developing volume that all goes under one individual agent's name. And that's not the kind of team I've ever looked at wanting to be. It's not bad. There's no bad or good. It's just I think you have to set your business plan up to work for you and to be authentic for you as an agent. But I'm very intrigued, and it seems to me that there could be a lot of benefits to my clients, and that would be the first and foremost reason I would implement a business development initiative. But that's something that's at the forefront. So maybe by 2017 we'll be, I don't know what we'll call ourselves, but maybe the Dobbs team.
And I guess kind of on top of that, what do you feel is the best way you market yourself as a real estate professional so you can have continual growth?
I think it's all about personal communication and picking up the phone, handwritten notes, networking with my professional peers or my professional associates. There's a lot of social media and search engine optimization. I have someone on my team or on my staff that does marketing and specifically search engine optimization and social media. And that is a way of growing one's business and certainly brings in leads. But I think to differentiate myself as a real estate agent and really market me as opposed to developing business, I think that takes personal. It's the one-on-one.
And Debra, I think whenever the general public looks at real estate agents, that sometimes they don't fully understand the value that they provide from both a buyer and a seller standpoint. What do you think the biggest misconception or myth people have about working with a real estate agent?
I think that there's the impression that agents are all about their commission first, and when I think people think that we're overpaid. I don't think that either of those are true, or at least they're not true in my case. And again, I work with some really, really amazing, smart people that are tops in the profession, and it's anything but that. I mean, a good agent knows that you're in this for the long haul, and if you approach your business based on individual deal, you'll never make it.
And Debra, let's say you get a call from a family member or a friend, and they're in another state, and they want to sell their home. Now, obviously, with your extensive experience and probably with your connections, you could easily look up an agent and do a referral. But from a general advice standpoint, what advice would you give them about selecting an agent that could best serve their needs?
Well, I can tell you what I do. I pretend when I travel sometimes if it's a market that I'm interested in, because every time I'm on vacation, no matter where, I'm always interested in the real estate market. I sort of go with this approach that, well, if I were going to buy or sell a house here, what would I do? And this is the advice that I would give a friend or a family member. I would visit open houses. So let's say I'm in a community and I have a house and where there's signs out on the street, if it's a single-family home, you go visit open houses and get to meet some agents. I mean, one way to find an agent is to meet someone at an open house, and if they're doing a really good job and they are acting in a way that if you have an agent sitting your house for an open house, that's how you would want your agent to present themselves in your property. I think that's a good indicator to at least get a name of someone that you might interview or further explore. Also, you can ask friends. If any of your friends have recently bought or sold, did they have a good experience with their agent? But I would take it one step beyond that. If you ask someone and the answer is yes, and then why? Because sometimes, and this is why there's a different fit between, there can be an agent that works well with one particular client and maybe not so well with another, or vice versa. And that is, everyone has a different set of expectations and a way that they work and communicate. So it's important that fit, to me, the fit between the agent and the client is as important as the professional credentials of the real estate agent. So asking someone if they had a good experience and then why will help you know if the why matches what would be important to you in picking your agent.
Excellent. And Debra, obviously based out of the Chicago, Illinois area, and if somebody's looking for real estate services or an agent in that general area, what's the best way they can find out more information about you and how you can help them?
Well, I would love for them to call me, and they can have my phone number, or visit my website. If someone were to go on my website, debradobbs.com, they would find everything. I mean, I have a blog, I write a weekly blog post. I'm very into the 77 neighborhoods of Chicago, and I have a whole section just about Chicago's neighborhoods and what I love about them, and then some data points, and lots of client testimonials. But if someone wants to get to know me, just pick up the phone and call.
Excellent. Well, Debra, I obviously want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come here today and share all your professional real estate experience with our listeners. And if you're listening and you want to learn more about Debra, you can go to her website, like she said. Also, below this interview, we'll have a link to her site and any other contact information we have so you can see how she can help you with your real estate needs. So with that said, everybody, until our next show, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.